My name is Amy Farmer, and I will be discussing the action plan of Chechnya. This map depicts the North Caucasus consisting of Dagestan, Ingushetia, and Chechnya. As the Chechen wars have had a significant impact on this region, many efforts have been targeted toward the North Caucasus as a whole. Therefore, when discussing Chechnya, it is important to recognize that these efforts are often distributed among the North Caucasus region. As previously discussed, Russia has been rebuilding Chechnya, although corruption still exists which impedes some of the efforts. The United States continues to appropriate funds in the annual budget for the North Caucasus relief efforts. In fiscal year 2010, $6 million was appropriated for humanitarian, conflict mitigation, human rights, civil society, relief and recovery assistance, promotion of economic opportunities due to the extreme financial devastation, youth employment, health improvements, sanitation, and community development. However, the United States has stipulated that 60% of the assistance allocated to Russia for the North Caucasus, including Chechnya, will be withheld, excluding medical, human trafficking, and comprehensive threat reduction aid, until the President certifies that Russia is facilitating full access to Chechnya for international non-governmental organizations providing humanitarian relief to displaced persons. Some of the worst human rights violations still occur in Chechnya. Violence, including killings, torture, and abuse, hostages being held under threat of death, and homes being burned are by or instigated by law enforcement officials. The United Nations Human Rights Committee in October of 2009 urged Russia to take rigorous measures to end the extreme human rights violations. The European Court of Human Rights of the Council of Europe has ruled in many Chechen cases against the Russian government's use of force. Although the Russian government has paid for damages to the plaintiffs, policies and the justice system has not changed. There have even been some plaintiffs killed in Chechnya before their cases were adjudicated. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in June of 2010 approved a resolution recommending that the Russian government combat terrorism in a law-based fashion by prosecuting members of security forces involved in human rights violations. Relations between the European Union and the Russian Federation have been strained over the human rights dilemma that continues in this area. Now I would like to focus on the relief efforts toward the North Caucasus, focusing primarily on Chechnya for the moment. As you can see, the United Nations, non-governmental organizations, and donors have collectively provided Chechnya with large financial contributions to aid in relief efforts. Unfortunately, much of the financial efforts began to significantly decrease around 2005, with many organizations ceasing relief altogether. The Interagency Transitional Work Plan consisted of 9 United Nations agencies and 13 non-governmental agencies that joined in 2006 to provide relief aid to Chechnya and its neighboring republics. This assistance consisted of aid for agriculture, economic and infrastructure recovery efforts, education, food, health, human rights protection, security, shelter, water, and sanitation. I've posted a link to the list of agencies that were involved in these efforts. I have listed all of the United Nations agencies that contributed to Chechen relief efforts, such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations World Food Program, the United Nations Development Program, the United Nations Department of Safety and Security, and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Collectively, these agencies within the United Nations have provided aid to improve economic conditions and reduce poverty, through job development, agricultural development, food assistance efforts, security and human rights protection, education by supporting rehabilitation and vocational training, shelter by providing alternative and temporary living amenities, efforts to improve health conditions, and water and sanitation. As there were many other agencies outside of the United Nations that supplied and continue to supply aid to Chechnya, including many non-governmental agencies, I wanted to highlight just a couple. The European Commission Humanitarian Aid and Civil Protection Agency has provided aid to Chechnya since 1999. Aside from relief in the form of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, water and sanitation, and legal support, they have aided in efforts to provide psychosocial programs to children where play areas and camps and settlements were created for Chechens, and they also train teachers and psychologists. In addition, many livelihood support activities began in 2004, where sewing workshops, bakeries, carpentry, and brick production instruction took place in an attempt to reduce unemployment and poverty. By 2006, 80% of these livelihood support activities were agricultural based, such as greenhousing, sheep breeding, and beekeeping. Unfortunately, this organization began to phase out humanitarian assistance in 2008. This was due to political and economic situations that prevented their ability to meet the needs of the majority of the population. Islamic Relief Worldwide is an agency that has been providing aid to Chechnya for 18 years and continues to do so. They provided artificial limbs to those who suffered from injuries caused by mine explosions. Unfortunately, there are still many landmines that lay dormant in Chechnya today and put civilians, including children, at risk for dismemberment or even death. This organization also provided orthopedic footwear for children, vocational classrooms, tools and safety gear, assisted with teaching children with hearing disabilities to read and write, and continued projects in rehabilitation, livestock development, and orphan support. Although a need for humanitarian aid still exists in Chechnya today, many organizations have significantly decreased or discontinued aid to this region. As you can see in this picture, in 2012, Chechnya continues to be a troubled area where concern for safety impedes many humanitarian efforts due to the unstable conditions. You can help by making donations to agencies that continue to support relief efforts in Chechnya and by bringing public awareness of the continued human rights violations that still occur today. This link has a list of organizations that accept donations. Thank you.